The engine of the '65 Mustang gave one last, desperate cough before dying completely. Silence rushed in to fill the void. Jack slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "You have got to be kidding me." He checked his watch. 2:13 a.m. Outside, the Arizona desert was a vast ocean of black, broken only by the pale, indifferent glow of the moon. He stepped out onto the gravel shoulder of Route 66. The air was bone-dry and unnaturally cold. No cell service, no traffic, just the wind whistling through the scrub brush. Then, he saw it. Twin beams of yellow light pierced the fog down the highway, cutting through the darkness like knives. It wasn't a car. As it rumbled closer, Jack realized it was a bus, a massive, silver-sided Greyhound Cine cruiser, the kind that hadn't been manufactured in decades. With a long, mournful hiss of hydraulics, the bus ground to a halt right beside him. The door folded open with a metal groan. Desperate to get out of the cold, Jack climbed aboard. "Thank God you stopped. My car gave up the ghost a mile back." Stepping inside was like walking into a meat locker. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of stale cigar smoke and damp wool. "Ticket," a voice rasped. The conductor stood in the shadows near the entrance, his uniform frayed and gray with dust. His cap was pulled low, hiding his eyes. Jack fumbled for his wallet, shivering. Sure. How much to the next town? Flagstaff?" "We don't stop at Flagstaff," the conductor replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "We only go to the end." "Right. Okay. Just get me out of here." Jack handed over a $10 bill. As the conductor took it, his fingers brushed Jack's palm. They were colder than the desert wind, hard and lifeless, like marble. Jack hurried to a seat midway down the aisle. The bus was eerily quiet. A dozen passengers sat scattered throughout the cabin. A woman in a polka-dot dress, a soldier in olive drab fatigues, an elderly man clutching a fedora. They sat rigid, staring straight ahead, swaying slightly with the vibration of the engine. None of them blinked. None of them breathed. A creeping dread began to crawl up Jack's spine. He looked toward the front. The driver was a hulking silhouette, his broad shoulders hunched over the massive steering wheel. "Hey, driver," Jack called out, his voice cracking slightly in the silence. "This is one hell of a vintage ride. Don't see these on the road much anymore." Silence. Jack leaned forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I said nice bus. Must be a pain to find parts for a 55, huh?" Suddenly, the conductor was standing right beside him. Jack hadn't heard him move. "He doesn't speak," the conductor whispered. "Not since the crash." "Crash?" Jack's mouth went dry. "October, 1955, the conductor murmured. "Brakes failed on Dead Man's Curve. A night just like this." Jack looked around frantically. In the flickering light of a passing street lamp, the illusion broke. The passengers weren't sleeping. The soldier had a gash on his forehead that showed bone. The woman's neck was bent at a sickening angle. Their skin was waxy, pale, and peeling. Who are you people?" Jack stammered, backing into the aisle. "We are the lost," the conductor said, slowly tilting his head up. Beneath the brim of his cap, there were no eyes, only empty, hollow pits of darkness. "Let me out," Jack screamed, spinning toward the driver. "Stop the bus." The driver slowly turned his head. Jack's scream died in his throat. There was no face, just a polished, grinning skull with two burning embers glowing in the sockets. The skeletal jaw clicked open. "End of the line, kid." Adrenaline surged. Jack threw himself at the door, prying the metal flaps open with hysterical strength. He leaped into the night, tucking his body as he hit the asphalt. He rolled, skinning his hands and knees before coming to a stop in the dirt. Gasping for air, he scrambled to his feet and looked back. The road was empty. No bus, no taillights, no sound of an engine, just the lonely desert highway stretching into the dark. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed in the distance. An Arizona Highway Patrol cruiser pulled up. The officer stepped out, flashlight beam cutting across Jack's terrified face. "Son, you look like you've seen a ghost. You okay?" "The bus." Jack pointed a shaking finger at the empty road. "The old Greyhound. It was full of dead people." The officer froze. His expression softened into a weary sigh. He tipped his hat back. You saw it too, huh? Happens every year around this time. The ghost of 66. Went off the cliff back in 55. No survivors. Jack looked down at his trembling hand. He was still clenching his fist. Slowly, he opened his fingers. Resting in his palm was a bus ticket. It was yellowed, brittle with age, and stamped with a date. The 31st of October, 1955. The mist in the Pacific Northwest doesn't just obscure your vision, it swallows you whole. My rental SUV had lost its GPS signal miles back, leaving me to navigate the winding logging roads blindly. I was hunting for the Blackwood estate. Marcus Blackwood, an eccentric billionaire turned recluse, had summoned me to survey the wild borders of his property near the Olympic National Forest. When the iron gates finally loomed out of the fog, the silence was absolute. The house wasn't just a home, it was a fortress of timber and stone, brooding against the gray sky. I found Blackwood out back, near the kennels. But calling them kennels was a kindness, they were reinforced steel cells. He didn't hear my approach. He was kneeling in the mud, consumed by a strange task. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound of metal grinding against enamel set my teeth on edge. "Hold still, you beauty," he cooed, his voice rough as gravel. As I stepped closer, the scene sharpened into a nightmare. Inside the cage sat a beast, technically a dog, but with the mass of a black bear. Its fur was midnight dark, and its eyes burned with a terrifying ancient intelligence. Blackwood wasn't petting the creature. He was sharpening its teeth with a heavy industrial file. "Mr. Blackwood?" The beast emitted a low rumble that vibrated in the soles of my boots. Blackwood snapped his head around. He was gaunt, his face eaten by shadows. Around his neck hung a grotesque ornament on a leather cord, a yellowed, jagged thing that looked disturbingly like a human finger bone. "You're early, Mr. Ray," he said, wiping bone dust onto his trousers. The beast didn't bark. It just watched me. Not with the instinct of an animal, but with the calculating stare of a man. That night, Blackwood insisted I stay. "The roads are treacherous in the dark," he said, offering a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. Dinner was a suffocating affair. His wife Camille sat in silence, her eyes darting nervously between her husband and the darkened windows. Unable to sleep, I wandered out to the porch late that night. The air smelled of pine and ozone. I found Sam, the old groundskeeper, smoking a pipe in the shadows. "You shouldn't be out here, son," Sam whispered, his eyes fixed on the tree line. "The master, he wanders. He walks the dogs?" Sam chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "In a way. You saw that necklace? That's old magic, Navajo stuff. Some folks say he isn't just training that beast. Some say he becomes it." He pressed a rough pouch into my hand. It smelled of sage and metallic silver. "Keep this close. Don't ask questions. Just keep it close." I returned to the guest cabin, dismissing the warning as backwoods superstition. But at 2 a.m., logic abandoned me. It started with a sound. Scratch. Heavy. Deliberate. I froze. Through the cabin window, bathed in moonlight, I saw it. The massive black dog stood on its hind legs, pressing its face against the glass. Its eyes were wrong. They weren't canine. They were human. They were Blackwood's eyes. Then, the doorknob began to turn. Fear, cold and primal, seized my chest. A dog paws at a door. It doesn't twist a knob. As the lock clicked, I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and the pouch Sam had given me. The door burst open with a splintering crash. The beast lunged a blur of shadow, muscle, and razor-sharp teeth. I swung the poker blindly, feeling a sickening thud as it connected with the creature's shoulder. In the same motion, I hurled the pouch of silver and sage into its snarling face. The creature didn't bark. It screamed a sound that was half howl, half human agony. Smoke hissed where the pouch struck its snout. It recoiled, stumbling back into the night, leaving the smell of burnt hair and ozone in its wake. Morning brought a grim silence to the estate. I found Sam and a weeping Camille in the main study. Slumped in a leather armchair lay Marcus Blackwood. He was dead. His body was cold, but the sight of it froze the blood in my veins. On his shoulder blossomed a massive purple bruise exactly where my poker had struck the beast. And his face, it was contorted in a silent scream, marred by burn marks that smelled faintly of sage. The bone necklace lay shattered on the floor. Skinwalker, Sam muttered, closing Blackwood's staring eyes. He spent so long inside the skin, he forgot how to be a man. Guess he finally picked a fight he couldn't win. I packed my bags and left without a word. As I sped down the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The steel cage was open. The beast was gone. But as the estate vanished into the fog, I knew the truth. The monster hadn't escaped. I had left him dead in the armchair. The heat out here in the Louisiana bayou don't just sit on you. It sticks to you like a second skin. I was sitting on the warped wooden porch of a shack that looked like a stiff breeze might knock it over. Across from me rocked old Tom Blackwood. In these parts, folks didn't call him a tantric. That word don't mean much in the swamp. They called him a root doctor, or simply the man who knows. Tom took a slow pull from his corncob pipe, the sweet smell of tobacco mixing with the stench of stagnant water and rotting cypress. He fixed his milky eyes on me. "So," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding under a boot. "You drove all the way from the city to hear about the water devil? You got a morbid curiosity, son." He leaned forward, the shadows from the lantern stretching across his weathered face. "It ain't a story for the faint of heart. But, seeing as the moon is hiding tonight, I reckon I can tell ya." Tom pointed a crooked finger toward the dark tree line. "Back in '74, I wasn't the broken-down old mule you see now. I was young, strong, thought I owned this swamp. We had a fishing spot deep in the marsh called Blind Man's Bend. The water there, it ain't right. It's too still, black as crude oil and cold as a dead man's hand." He paused for effect, letting the chirping of the crickets fill the silence. Folks started vanishing. Experienced fishermen, men who knew the bayou like the back of their hand, just gone. No overturned boats, no blood in the water, just empty silence. Then, the Miller boy saw it. "Saw what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A hand," Tom murmured, staring into the dark. Pale, bloated, reaching up from the muck to grip the side of a skiff. He said the water didn't ripple. It was like the swamp itself had opened a mouth. I knew then, this wasn't no gator. This was a haint, a restless spirit bound to the water. A devil. Tom's eyes narrowed. I took my flat-bottom boat out at the witching hour. Pitch black. I didn't bring a gun. Bullets don't hurt shadows. I brought a jar of graveyard dirt, iron nails, and the old roots my granddaddy taught me to use. When I drifted into the bend, the silence hit me. No frogs croaking, no night birds. Just the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. Then, the boat lurched. Tom gripped the arms of his chair. Something grabbed the keel, not a bump, a pull, a heavy, hungry pull. I stood up, shouting the binding words, my voice shaking. The water started to boil. Bubbles, the size of fists, rose up, smelling of sulfur and ancient rot. And then I saw it. A face, floating just under the surface. It looked human enough, but the eyes, they burned yellow, like dying embers in a fire. It lunged. Tom slapped the armrest, making me jump. A slimy, pale arm shot out of the black water and clamped onto my ankle. Cold! God, it was colder than ice. It dragged me down, trying to pull me into the deep. I fell back, kicking, scrambling, and grabbed that jar of graveyard dirt. I smashed that jar right onto its wrist. The second that holy dirt hit its skin, the thing shrieked a sound like metal tearing through bone. The water exploded upwards. For one split second, I saw the whole thing. It wasn't a man. It was a tangle of weeds, mud, and hate, shaped like a nightmare. I threw the iron nails into the swirl and finished the chant. The water hissed, froze, and then the thing was sucked back down, dragging a whirlpool with it. Old Tom sat back, his chest heaving as if he had just fought the battle all over again. He exhaled a long plume of smoke. I rode back so fast my hands bled. We never went back to Blind Man's Bend. Some say it's still down there, waiting for the binding to rot away. Waiting for a fool who thinks the water is just water. He looked me dead in the eye, his expression grim. "So you take this warning back to your city, son. The bayou has secrets. And some things, well, some things are better left buried in the mud."